From the author of Spinsterella, the strange and unusual romance and spellbound, a darker shade of black comes the legendary Magic Children. Pick up the conclusions of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers this Halloween. Well, I was at Brookfield Place yesterday morning before my interview. I had a moment to take a look at several of the comments about the Black Panther trailer video. And several people wanted to say that I was being very negative about this movie, and I'm not being negative at all. What I am presenting to people is an objective critique of this film from my experience as a screenwriter and my experience as an African American fantasy writer and someone who has studied Marvel Comics and the history of Marvel Comics. So I'm presenting a balanced view of this film. The big problem with many of these Negro nerds out here and many of these black comic fans is that they are coming at this film from an emotional perspective. And because they are approaching this film from an emotional perspective, they're not seeing this film and judging it on the merits of a film. They're not judging it from the merit of what type of content is in this film and how this film is presented to the viewer. They're so caught up in the whole idea of getting attention from white people that they're not thinking about how this film is representing them or how it's being representing the character in an artistic fashion. When I take a look at this film, I take a look at this film from a very objective perspective and I judge it on a different set of criteria. And my criteria I judge this film by is, are they being true to the source material? One. Two, are they presenting visual imagery that is positive of African Americans? And three, are they presenting the story in an artistic fashion that meets the standards of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And when I look at it from those standards, that's where I'm seeing some serious problems. Because when I look at this film and I compare it to 2008's Iron Man, which did a very good job of staying true to the source material and telling us a story that captured the spirit of the character, I really don't see that. And when I see the portrayal of African Americans in this film, that's where I really have some serious concerns. Because when I look at the way they are presenting the source material, yes, they have given us a Black Panther movie, but this is where I have the issue with this film. Is when the presentation of the Black Panther is not really giving us the character in his own story. What we're really getting is the character as white people see him. And this really ties right into my issues with this film as related to the image of African Americans. Because from that perspective, we're seeing black people through that white lens. And the way they are presenting this Black Panther in his world of Wakanda is from a very white supremacist perspective and a very paternalistic perspective. Because when we see T'Challa in that opening scene of the trailer, we have this white man who is so awestruck by the idea of black people having their own civilization and it being so advanced. So it's like this guy who's white supremacist is sitting there saying, I haven't seen anything like this from black people. Like, black people cannot be as creative as Iron Man or Thor or anybody else in the Marvel Universe. Black people just, they're not known for doing these kind of things. And that's kind of a backhanded insult at African Americans, because African Americans, what most people don't know, have made many innovations in this country. And to say that this world of Wakanda is something that they have never experienced before, and it's so advanced that they have never that they couldn't even imagine anything like this. Again, that's kind of like a passive aggressive, backhanded insult at black people. And I look at that from that perspective because that really shows me a lot of the white supremacy in the undertones of this film, and really even in the undertones of the character. When I look at the idea that, oh, a black person cannot achieve on the level of white people, and for us to actually see this is like awe-struck. That really rubs me the wrong way, especially when I've seen and known all about the achievements of black people throughout history. So that point right there is something that's a real serious issue with me as related to one of the core foundations of one of the themes of this movie. Now, another thing that I have a big problem with as a screenwriter is the way this film is presenting its images. And I've said this before in numerous videos. It looks like they're doing a lot of telling, and that's really not a strong way to tell a story. When you're telling me a story, it's very passive. I'm not really actively engaged. And when I look at Black Panther's visuals, they're telling me about Wakanda. They're not really showing me Wakanda, and they're not showing me Wakanda from T'Challa's perspective. When we watched Iron Man and Captain America, we saw the movie from Steve Rogers' perspective and Tony Stark's perspective. And that allowed us to immerse ourselves into that world and really experience things as they were experiencing them. As Tony Stark grew into his role of Iron Man, we started to see that. And with Steve Rogers growing into his role of Captain America, we really started to see that. But with the Black Panther, it seems like we're passively standing there in the background and things are just happening. And that really reminds me of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther run, where he has the Black Panther really being passive. When you're in a film and you're doing screenwriting, like when I write screenplays and movies, you really want to have people actively involved. You want the main character to be at the forefront. You want to have them as the center of the action. When the main character is not the center of the action, our eyes are taken away from the story and we're really not immersed. And that's what I'm seeing with a lot of these Black Panther frames of footage that were presented in the trailer. It's looking very passive, and that's not a really strong way to shoot a film. You really want your main character to be at the center of all the action in the story, and you want your main character to be driving the action in the story. And I don't really see, from what I've seen in this film, T'Challa really driving the action in the story. That's why I say it's telling us a story about the Black Panther, not showing us T'Challa and what he wants to do, what his mission is, and most importantly, why we should care. This is why I say I'm really indifferent about this movie, because it's not giving me a reason to care about it. Now, Captain America Civil War, I was really engaged in that trailer because they gave me a reason to care. I saw the danger, I saw the peril, I saw Steve Rogers and his relationship with Bucky and how much he cared about Bucky, and how he also cared about his values and ideals of freedom and justice that he fought for in the Second World War, and how he was at odds with Tony Stark because he didn't want the Avengers to be under government regulation. What he really wanted to do was maintain freedom, because he saw himself as being a protector of society. And what he was trying to do is he was coming at it, as I saw it, from an objective perspective, whereas Tony Stark his emotions were all tied up into things because of the failure of Ultron and what happened in Slorenia. So he was really caught up in his emotions. But Steve Rogers was seeing it as, if they didn't stop this Ultron, the whole world would have been destroyed. So a lot of people are looking at it from the statement of the loss of lives in Slorenia, but he was looking at it from, you could have lost the entire world. So I understood where things were going in Civil Wars related to that story. But with this movie, they really don't really tell us much that makes you want to actively get involved with the story. It's not very strong. And when you're having a trailer, you have to be strong. And when you're putting imagery and footage, that imagery has to be very, very strong to actively involve you into the story. Because I saw that with the Thor Ragnarok trailer, where it looks like a very strong trailer. I don't know what the film is going to be like, but I know that the Thor Ragnarok trailer was far more engaging than the Black Panther trailer. The Black Panther trailer was it wasn't strong. It wasn't compelling. That's why I say I wasn't impressed by it, because when I compare it to previous Marvel films, and I can even compare it to even DC's Wonder Woman, which wasn't the greatest film of all, but it did do a very good job. Patty Jenkins did do a very good job of presenting that character, presenting her mission, and she kind of gave you a reason to care, but wasn't that strong because of the screenplay. But she managed to do things with the visuals that managed to engage you a bit more than even this Black Panther movie trailer did. When I look at this trailer, it's not strong. It's not something that's going to get people emotions into it, to the point where they say, I want to spend money to go see this. It makes you kind of indifferent because everything is told from the wrong perspective. You're seeing it again from that white supremacist view and that white liberal view of black people, not the view of ourselves. I mean, in contrast, Blade, we saw again a character actively involved. Wesley Snipes' character was the primary focus. His mission was primary focus, and he gave you a reason to care. So those are three things that relate to screenwriting, which is who is the main character, what do they want, what obstacles do they face in getting what they want, and why we should care. Those are three questions a screenwriter has to answer within the first 10 minutes of the movie, and even these days, the first 5 minutes of the movie. So those questions really weren't answered in that trailer. Again, it was just too much telling, not enough showing. And people will think that, oh, I'm being negative about this film, but really, again, I'm presenting you with a balanced and objective perspective on this film, because I don't come at these superhero movies and see it as some sort of accomplishment for there to be just a black superhero movie. This is what the big problem with many black comic fans is that, and black nerds, is that they come at it thinking that, oh, if we don't all get behind this movie, we won't get any others. And that's really the wrong perspective to have on it, because we can create our own movies. We don't need Hollywood to validate us in creating our own movies and telling our own stories. We really should not be looking for the validation and approval of white people and their media. We should be creating our own media. That's what I do with the SJS Direct imprint. I'm not looking for white people to validate me or white people to approve of me. And many white people buy many of my ISIS series books and many of the other books in the SJS Direct imprint all the time. And I'm not looking for their approval. No, when I create a story, I want to present an image about African Americans from the African American experience, my experiences, and I want to open up African American culture so that other people can see our culture for what it truly is and not be dictated to what our culture is by outside sources. When I look at this Black Panther movie, this is the kind of film that really pushes a lot of ideas and things that the white liberal wants to push regarding black people, and tells a story really from this white liberal's perspective on black people. Is not telling the story from our perspective and our experiences. Yes, he's a black superhero, but I don't really see much of black culture in this film, black history in this film, or anything related to African Americans. It's just African American actors acting in a film about a black character that was created by white people and presents their ideas about black people to the world. And a lot of those ideas that are presented in this Black Panther, they come across as really paternalistic. I mean, them saying, oh, I've seen gods come out of the sky and men make weapons far beyond things, and then I've never seen anything like this. Again, that's an insult to black people, saying that, oh, I could never think of a black person doing something like this. In the same way people would say, oh, this guy is so articulate and well spoken, and he dresses so well, like a black man can't do these type of things. And they're not used to that. It's like people they want to see is the people who fit their narrative, people who are wearing the sagging pants and the ball caps and talking about 40 ounces. And that's only a small perspective of black people. That's not even the entire black community. That's like 1/10 of 1% of the black community. Those aren't that's the image that many racists want to see, because it makes them feel better about themselves in society that they don't have to see a black person on that level. It makes them uncomfortable to see black people like myself. They would rather see that hip hop and thug guy because it makes them feel comfortable about their place in society. But they don't want to see the other images, but those images of black people are out there, and there are black people participating in lifestyles that are on the same level as white people all the time. That's what Bill Cosby tried to show people with The Cosby Show. That's what Robert Townsend tried to show people with The Parenthood. And that's also what I try to show in many of my SJS Direct books. I try to show you different perspectives and different takes of life, like I did with the Spinsterella trilogy, where I was trying to show you African Americans in the goth subculture. And what I try to do with books like The Fate is where I try to show you African Americans in a sorority. I try to show you different aspects of black culture and different perspectives. And that's one of the reasons why I write African American fantasy and science fiction, is because I want people to get that broader picture of African Americans and the African American culture and see that it's just not this one thing that white liberals like to put black people in, which is the ghetto and the hood, or with their perspective on Africa, which is what we see, excuse me, in a lot of the images in this Black Panther movie. I mean, the first images you're throwing up in the teaser, again, show me a lot of how racist many of these executives are. I mean, here you have these Africans wearing the plate. The one guy's got the plate lip. They've got the spears, and they've got all these old African tropes. And you have all of this in the teaser, and then in the trailer, we're getting stuff that's really not helping things, like those paternalistic, that introduction that was just so paternalistic, and that's really not really getting me excited about this film. Some people, again, I'm not being negative, but I grew up understanding more about black culture and the black experience, and when I see this story and I compare it to other stories that I have seen from other great filmmakers like Rick Famuyiwa with Dope and Ava DuVernay with I Will Follow, I don't see the artistry in this film. I don't see, story that's presenting us the way we should be presented, and presenting a balanced picture of us and a humanized picture of us. And it takes me back to something Robert Townsend tried to make a commentary on in 1987's Hollywood Shuffle. Now, I saw this movie when I was about 15 years old on VHS, and it is one of the movies that has stayed with me for the last 25, 26 years. And what he was trying to say is that, most of these images we're getting of black people in media in that film, he was trying to say those ideas come from white people. Those aren't us. This is how they see us, not how we see ourselves. Because I remember there was a sequence where he was making a satirical comment about, where the white guy's doing the jive shuffle and the black guy's trying to learn the jive shuffle. And the point he was trying to make was all those moves with the guys doing the jive shuffle, that was a white guy coming up with that idea of what a black person should be. That's not what that black person actually was. And the whole point of the film was that the Bobby Taylor character, he was trying to get this role in this movie because he wanted to have a career, but he wasn't really thinking about how these stereotypes impacted black people. And towards the end of the movie, he starts to realize what these images mean, what they represent, and the long-term impact of those images on the black community and on himself, because he really had to sit down and think, if I keep playing these type of roles, they're going to have an impact on not only on people, but on myself, because I'm the one breathing new life into this old stereotype. And if I'm breathing new life into this old stereotype, then all I'm doing is perpetuating false ideas. And that's not why he became an actor. He wanted to become an actor so he could do what he said in the later parts of the satire, which was, playing these richer, more complicated roles. And goes back to what I talked about in a previous video, which was about wanting more, because I could see Robert Townsend talking about more right there in that Hollywood Shuffle back in 1987, which is about 30 years ago. And that's what I want to do as a writer. That's what I do right now with books like Temptation of John Haynes, the ISIS series, and the East Eden series. I try to give people more. And the more is, I want to give you richer, multidimensional characters. I want to give you stories that really take you into a world where you're learning more about African American culture, and you're seeing things from unique perspectives, and you're learning that there is no one version of black, and that we shouldn't be trying to be putting ourselves into a box that fits the white person's version of black. And this is a point I made in 2016's Spellbound. You want to be the darker shade of black. And in the darker shade of black, this is the version of black that is defined by us, and the one that we see as having value, not what some white person tells us to have value, and what I see with a lot of the people who are crit or not happy with the way I'm talking about this Black Panther movie is that they're trying to fit within that box that I talked about in Spellbound, the black box that is acceptable to white people. And I'm a guy, I broke out of that box back in 89, 1990, and I'm looking at the world and saying, I don't want to be in that box. I don't want to be fitting into that box and trying to be acceptable to white people. I want to create the version of black that I define on my terms, and that's what I want to present in the works that I produce is the version of black that I define on my terms and shows you a unique perspective of black and shows us that we're not all the same. When I look at this, well, a lot of the Black Panther fans out there, they're just so desperate to see any image that is black. They're not thinking about how that image represents us, the ideas behind it, or the long-term impact of it. And they're just so eager to see a black superhero. They're not thinking about the content of his character. All they're thinking about is the color of his skin. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of the SJS Direct titles, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, and the Temptation of John Haynes, and many other books, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.